It's been started.
Okay, great. All right, so this is the agenda. So I will be going first, and I'll be giving the welcome and also talking about the High Energy Density Science Fellowship. Next, Ted Bellman will be talking about the Lawrence Fellowship, followed by Matthew Buchner, who will speak on the Foster and Brown Fellowships. And we will end the information session with a panel made of current and past fellows, and you'll be able to ask them questions. All right, so for the High Energy Density Science Postdoctoral Fellowship, I'll be presenting. I am the Deputy Director of the High Energy Density Science Center. I also chair the fellowship committee that makes the selection for the fellows. So I wanted to give a little bit of background about Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. First, it's one of 17 Department of Energy research laboratories. These are big laboratories, and one of the main purposes of a national laboratory is to do big science. So this is science beyond the capability of one professor at a university, projects that require a large collaboration of many scientists to do great things. And with big science also comes big parts of our infrastructure. For example, at Livermore, we have the National Ignition Facility, which is the most energetic laser system in the world, as well as the El Capitan, which is the fastest computer in the world. So Lawrence Livermore here also works closely with some of our sister laboratories. You might be familiar also with Los Alamos National Laboratory or Sandia National Laboratory. So Livermore is located in California in the Greater Bay Area outside of San Francisco. And it's roughly equidistant from San Francisco, San Jose, and Stockton. Its distance from the ocean is actually, I think, rather ideal, that you're not so close that you're in the fog and cool summer weather that they have nowadays, and not so far inland that you're in the hot desert. Our campus is about 1 square mile, and we have about 10,000 employees. And so it's a university-sized place. So we have many different topics of research going on at the lab. These here are our core competencies, things that we tend to focus on. So I will be speaking on high energy density science, but keep in mind that's not all of what the lab does. There's also a great research effort in bioscience and engineering, earth and atmospheric sciences. A growing field is advanced manufacturing, like additive manufacturing. I already mentioned the National Ignition Facility as being the most energetic laser system, but we do like to keep at the forefront of lasers and optical development. There's a core component of nuclear and chemical and isotopic science and technology. And of course, we have not only the fastest computer in the world, but we have 5 of the top 100 fastest and many, many others for our staff to use. And we also are developing computing technology at the forefront, including new architectures like quantum computing and all sorts of simulation techniques, artificial intelligence, and all that goes along with computational science. So I know many of you probably aren't very familiar with what high energy density science is. When I was a student, I certainly didn't have a good grasp of it. I don't think I even had heard of the term. So there are many different definitions, but one definition is that it's the science of material that is at pressures greater than 1 megabar. So the Earth's atmospheric pressure is about 1 bar. So megabar is 1,000,000 bars. That's pretty high. And that roughly corresponds to the pressure that you'd be under if you were trying to hold up the Empire State Building. And so that's 1 megabar. And we also study materials even with much greater pressure. So for example, during an inertial confinement fusion, ignition experiments that are going on at the NIF, we reached routinely reach pressures of gigabars, so another 1,000 times that megabar pressure, and that's hotter and denser than the core of our sun. But there's a lot of interesting science that happens at these conditions. So we need to know accurate information about equation of state. So what is the pressure as a function of density and temperature? We need to know about radiation transport. How does light propagate through these media, and all the sort of light matter interactions? How does the laser interact and get absorbed and scattered by the plasmas? Uh, these are plasmas, and so there are long-range interactions and very interesting many-body effects that occur within plasmas. And these are non-ideal plasmas, often at very high densities. There's a rich part of physics there. We often, within these plasmas, have various atoms and ions with many electrons and many different bound states, and need to understand all the transitions between those states. So atomic physics is an important aspect of HED, as well as all the different nuclear reactions that can occur at these hot and dense conditions. Now, of course, to reach these conditions, it requires putting in a lot of energy in a short period of time. So all the infrastructure that's needed to do that, for example, at the National Ignition Facility, with lasers and laser matter interactions and building those lasers and all the diagnostics that you need to understand the experiments that we conduct. So designing those experiments and using them and analyzing data, these things are all important. We need lots of different skills. And so that's why we do big science with many different scientists and people who can do experiment, people who can do simulations, computations, and regular basic theory. So, other skills that are needed that might not immediately fall in HED, but are definitely important. Knowing how to do radiation hydrodynamics is how many of our simulations are done. Then there's the laser optics, which I already mentioned, high performance computing to do simulations, as well as things like machine learning. We need all types of skills. So to get into the fellowship in particular, so our fellowship is now several years old. We have selected 6 fellows, 1 per year. So we have 3 current fellows, 1 who's about to start, and 2 former fellows. And our main purpose is really to attract top talent to work on high energy density science to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And we really want to look after the fellows' well-being and make sure that they're happy here and contributing and really be a success and to our programs and add to our community. So I mentioned that there are 2 past fellows, one of whom will be on the panel. Andrew Longman is now a staff member in the National Ignition Facility Directorate. One other got a fancy job at Meta. And the 3 current fellows are already doing great things, and you can see their research areas listed there. I would like to point out that the salary for these fellowships is very, very high compared to most postdoctoral fellowships. I wouldn't be surprised if they're amongst the highest in the world. So we really are interested in attracting top talent by paying them well and making sure they're happy here. The fellowship has a 2-year term, although all of our fellows so far have been able to extend to a 3rd. And this is, as long as everybody's happy and there's funding to do so, we will do our best to extend to 3 years. But the 3rd year is not guaranteed. Our deadline will be coming up in October, so October 6th. There will be another week to make sure your reference letters are in. So in terms of eligibility, I do want to point out that foreign nationals are eligible. This is a national laboratory, but we do like our foreign national colleagues, and we do hope you'll eventually join our team and become a U.S. citizen, but that is not required for this fellowship. There is one major exception. Within the past year, there was a new law that was passed that prohibits citizens of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea without a dual U.S. citizenship or legal permanent residency from actually being on lab property. So that puts a damper in your ability to work here. So my apologies if that disqualifies you, but it is the current law. And so we're not able to accept anybody that falls in this category. And this applies to, I think, almost all positions at the laboratory. You must have or be about to complete a PhD in a high energy density science related field. So this can be anything from physics, chemistry, or many different engineering disciplines to computer science. We're pretty broad in our interests. So as long as it makes sense for you to work within high energy density science, we think you're eligible. And there is no maximum number of years since your PhD. Of course, this position should make sense for your career trajectory and track. We do want you to be happy. I would also like to point out that all positions at the lab do require that before you start employment that you take a drug test. So that includes testing for marijuana. So please be advised that that will be the case. So these are the qualifications that we list on our job posting. I think the best way to summarize these is that we are looking for candidates who will have a strong positive impact on high energy density science in general, so in all areas, but in particular impact on high energy density science that's being done at Livermore. And so we want you to be able to fit into the lab and add to it. So in terms of how to apply, we do require that you find in advance of your application a prospective mentor. This can be any Livermore permanent research staff member. And I have their QR code that takes you right to the High Energy Density Science Center's website. There you can find information on various research that's being done within HED. And for each of those fields, there are points of contact, and you can use those points of contact to try to find a mentor if you do not have one in mind already. And if you're really having issues, you can also email me directly and I can help. So once you've identified a good mentor, and I think this is a key part of the application because I think a successful postdoctoral fellow will have a great relationship with their mentor. And so in order to maximize the chances of the fellow succeeding, we want to have you to have a good partnership there. So discuss research ideas with your mentor and try to figure out what is the intersection between what you're interested in, what the mentor is interested in, and what would be a good fit for the laboratory. And of course, you want to line up 3 reference letters. These are people who should be able to speak to your ability as a researcher and how you contribute to high energy density science at Livermore. One of them should be your PhD advisor. And you should also start drafting a research proposal as soon as possible. We do provide a template on our website that is required, that you should use that template. And this really helps you organize your thoughts for putting together that proposal. We'll also need your CV, your proposal names or references. We want transcripts from your schools, and also a summary slide of your application. And there's a template for that also on the website. And it's very important to make sure you submit your references by October 13th for full consideration, or make sure your references submit. And I will be checking to see if they're ones that are lagging behind and let you know. So after you get everything in, first thing I'll do is make sure that your prospective mentor is in favor of endorsing you for the fellowship. So I'll be sending them a short form, just basically checking off that they think you're a great candidate. So make sure you do select somebody who thinks that you are a well-qualified candidate for the fellowship. Then during the fall, there's a fellowship committee that reviews all the applications. I should note that I run the committee and design the whole selection process, but I do not make the decisions on who is selected, unless there's like a tie break that is needed. And by the end of the fall, we will identify a shortlist. The prospective mentors of the shortlist will be invited in December to present to the committee, and that basically showing why they think that you will be a great fellowship candidate and what you would be working on, and how you would fit into the laboratory. So shortly thereafter, we will notify our finalists. We expect to select 3 finalists, possibly 4. And then we'll arrange interviews in the January to February timeframe. Those will be single-day interviews where you'll get to be interviewed directly by the committee, as well as some subject matter experts and managers that we select. That be fine-tuned for each candidate. And then we hope to notify the preferred candidate in March. And then after we've gotten our candidate who's agreed to be our fellow, we will close the job posting. And we expect that the new fellow would start in the fall of 2026. There is some flexibility on the start date. So if you need a little earlier, a little later, that's okay, like plus or minus a couple months. So how to maximize your chances of getting the fellowship? I think one thing that's very important is to find a champion in your prospective mentor, somebody who can really advocate for you and make sure that they're going to be helping you with your research proposal, and really, if they're present to the committee, really can make a strong case that you are the one. So for your own research, ideally you should have multiple first author peer-reviewed papers, preferably in high-impact journals, and high-impact papers themselves. If you can get your letter writers to emphasize why the papers you've written are important, that would be great. Start writing your proposal now and get as much feedback as you can. And you can really iterate and get a really clean proposal together. As I mentioned before, your work should add to and be complementary to existing work at Livermore. So it's not just that you're a really great candidate, you should be a person who can be a great candidate at Livermore. And that you really make sure that's emphasized within your whole application. So everywhere chance you get, like within your research statement, your cover letter, make the case that you will thrive at Livermore and add to what we have here at Livermore. Otherwise, I'll take any questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Jen, is there something already there?
Yes, there are a few questions. The first one says, I have a China foreign national friend who was interested in a potential applying to the Lawrence Fellowship. He doesn't have a dual citizenship. Does the 2025 NDAA Section 3112 Act mean he is not eligible to apply?
So if he is not a dual U.S. citizen or permanent resident, he is not eligible. And unfortunately, yes, that's the case. Any other questions?
Yes, there's another question. I got my PhD degree from Germany and I don't have transcripts. Does a proof from university sufficient?
So we accept unofficial transcripts, uh, which will eventually be confirmed later. Um, and I think I'd need more information to be sure. Um, so please try to contact me directly and we can work out the details.
Okay, the next question is the research proposal written with your future mentor at LLNL?
Yes, so you should be the primary author. It should be written by you, but get feedback from your prospective mentor and anybody else you like. Um,
Right. The next question is when would the start date be for a successful candidate?
yeah, so as I mentioned, you can start uh, roughly in October of 2026, plus or minus 2 or 3 months. Yeah.
The next question. I have presented some of my HED research works in reputed, co- sorry, repute conferences like APS. 1, 2 are supposed to be submitted by this November. How, how practical is that my application can become successful if everything else is very good?
So we do judge every application on a case-by-case basis. It is possible, like especially if you get your reference letters to emphasize that these papers will be uh, published very soon after your application date, um, that the committee will take that into account, and especially if it's emphasized how impactful they are. But typically, the successful applications will have multiple peer-reviewed papers already out. So submit as soon as possible. It's my best advice.
Okay, the next question is, does HED research include research with diamond anvil cells, or is this just shock compression?
Yes, diamond anvil cells are relevant.
And the next question, can you explain a little more about what you mean by find a champion? Is it for letter writing or only for proposal help?
I think you know this can be more than one person. Basically, somebody who will help your career. So it's good to have good research mentors throughout your career. In particular, here I'm just trying to say uh, a successful application should have a research mentor uh, who will champion your application. And that's what I was trying to draw attention to. Um, but in all aspects of life, it's good to have a champion. Anything else?
The next question just came in. Does the mentor need to be part of the HED or the head center?
No, any staff member at Livermore is eligible to be a mentor. The research, however, should be relevant to high energy density science. And, and that, I think we should move on to the next section. Um, so Ted Bowman was going to present on the Lawrence Fellowship. If there are any other questions that come through in the chat, I will try to answer them within the chat, okay? Are you able to share, Ted?
I'm doing it right now. So let's see. Um, All right. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. Oh, let's go back a slide here. Okay, so yes, thank you for that setup. This is the nice thing about going second is Paul talked a lot about stuff that's going to apply to all three fellowships here, so it saves me some time in terms of getting into the specifics. But yeah, I'm here today. Well, I should start off. My name is Ted Bauman. I am the lead for the institutional postdoc program here at Lawrence Livermore. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of this as well, about the postdoc program at the lab. But I'm also the chair of the Lawrence Fellow Committee. So the Lawrence Fellowship is a highly competitive postdoctoral position at Livermore that's open to all technical disciplines. So this is different than what Paul was just talking about. And what this fellowship allows you to do is pursue your own independent research agenda here at the lab, but with an infrastructure in place that can help support you. We have subject matter experts who can provide guidance and mentorship as you design and execute your research plan. We have some contact information here. Here's a photo of our three Lawrence Fellows from 2023, one of which is on our panel today, Kyle. So let's see here. All right, so our for the application, as Paul said, it's you know, it's the same set of requirements. We want your CV, an impact statement of 3 or 4 sentences about why your research is not only important, but how it aligns with the lab. Then you're going to submit your original research proposal up to 6 pages, and then your letters of rec and transcripts. So the key selection criteria here when we're evaluating Lawrence Fellow packages, it really falls into three bins. It's your potential for technical leadership at the lab. It's the quality of the work that you're proposing and how well does that work fit at Livermore. So the key parts of what you're submitting are your statement of your technical interests, your letters of recommendation, as Paul said, that your the people that are writing your letters of rec, hopefully they can articulate, you know, what you've been able to accomplish up to this point and how that sets you up or positions you well for having a successful postdoctoral fellowship here at the lab. Your publication record up to that point from grad school or a previous postdoc position, and then, like I said, how well does the work that you're proposing fit with Livermore's mission? So I list here again the focus areas that Paul showed on a previous slide. Your proposed work doesn't need to fit neatly into a single box, but it should align with one of our 7 focus areas of HED science, bioscience and bioengineering, lasers and optical science, earth and atmospheric science, advanced materials and manufacturing, nuclear and isotopic science, and then HPC and data science. So, you know, you could envision a proposal that obviously fits into multiple boxes, but alignment with one of those areas, I think, is key because that is part of our selection criteria. Why are we doing it at the lab? You know, it's a question that we ask ourselves all the time, even non-fellows. So let's see here. And as far as the process goes, the posting opened in late July. Applications are due on October 1st. We allow a week following for letters of recommendation to come in. Once all the applications are in, the selection committee is going to have a month or 2 to review all the applications. The selection committee is a group of 14 staff scientists here at the lab, 2 representatives from each of the 7 focus areas that I just listed. So your application will be seen by a subject matter expert in your area. And what we're going to do is essentially through multiple processes get from, you know, 300 applications down to 6 finalists. At that point, the finalists are going to be invited to Livermore for a 2-day or an up to 2-day interview. That's going to include you presenting your research, meeting with our committee. You'll also meet with a technical panel that are experts in your field that are going to talk to you a little bit more about the specifics of your proposal to assess the feasibility of doing that work here at the lab, at Livermore, I should say. And I don't want to concern you like that. That's not like doing your thesis defense again. These are people that have experience in your area, and they're there. It's a friendly discussion. So, but I think most of the finalists, whether they're selected or not, really benefit from that meeting with our technical panel. But also, you can do tours of the lab. Obviously, visiting the National Ignition Facility, visiting our HPC center, things like that. So, and also meeting with people. And this is what Paul was talking about earlier, matching you up with a mentor. Most of the time, mentors for prospective Lawrence Fellows are identified on the 2-day interview, somebody on the tech panel or somebody that one of the tech panel members or the committee member knows it might be a good fit for you. And so you don't necessarily need to come in with a mentor in mind if you don't know. At the end of that, we go through the excruciating process of taking that 6 and selecting up to 3 new Lawrence Fellows at the end of that process. So, but oftentimes those finalists, they don't end up becoming Lawrence Fellows. We do make a best effort to see if there's not a fit with that person with another posting that we currently have up at the lab. The outcomes, typically at the end of the fellowships, we do have a process for converting postdocs directly to staff here at the lab. There's a process known as conversion where you can go from a postdoc to a staff member without having to go through the full interview process again. And so historically, roughly about 60% of our Lawrence Fellows we convert to staff, but a number of them do end up leaving for positions at top tier universities, go out into industry. We even had one Lawrence Fellow go to work for a Major League Baseball team, which is kind of interesting. So, so there are opportunities both at the lab and obviously being a Lawrence Fellow definitely gives you a leg up in some of the academic job search opportunities. So. The term of the fellowship is for 3 years, and the funding is essentially you're being paid your salary plus up to $200K per year for research expenses, which could include supplies, travel, paying summer students to work on your project, things like that. So you do have a decent amount of funding available to cover any non-labor expenses or any expenses that don't include your own salary. The salary there is shown. That's for FY25, and obviously we evaluate our postdoc salaries each year, so that number will probably be different for next year, but that's what the FY25 salary was. As far as eligibility goes, everything that Paul said is the same. Foreign nationals can apply, but the NDAA policy does impact people that are from certain countries. So, we end up having to select them out of the process early on. But yeah, foreign nationals from countries that aren't affected by the NDAA policy are welcome to apply. Let's see. The other thing is, as Paul said, start dates. We have flexibility on that. Typically everything is centered around the beginning of the fiscal year, October 1. But if you're ending if you're defending your thesis and ending grad school early, we can certainly start you early. Or if it goes past October 1, that's not a hard date for us. So we do have flexibility around that. And as Paul said, also, you don't have to have completed your PhD as long as you're expected to finish in the relative near future around that October 1 date. But certainly we can't onboard you until you've successfully defended your thesis. Let's see. the one final thing I wanted to say, and I'd be remiss as the lead of the institutional postdoc program here at Livermore if I didn't mention one of the big advantages to coming to Livermore as a postdoc is that we've created a system that allows you to enhance your professional development outside of your fellowship or your primary research project here at the lab. So all these fellowships are supplemented with what we call the career development account. And I just want to say, I won't go into a lot of details on this, but essentially what the lab has done, or Livermore has done, is set up, they've set aside funding to allow postdocs to spend up to 25% of their time in pursuit of professional development activities. So this is a real big advantage if you're considering multiple options after grad school for postdocs. Coming here to the lab, you're going to have that 25% free energy to pursue professional development opportunities. So just a few examples of what you could use that for: finishing up papers from grad school, attending conferences, writing proposals. You know, if you were a Lawrence Fellow, that's probably not a priority for you because you're already funded on a. But you could write proposals for after your fellowship is over. And also just enhancing your skill sets, whether they're in science, learning new techniques, new way of doing modeling, simulation, learning new coding languages, things like that, or soft skills, you know, how to be a better manager of people. These are all things that are available to you. So, you know, when we talk about the funding here for the Lawrence Fellows, that salary is it's 75% of your time here. The other 25% is covered by the career development account. So just something to consider as you consider your options going forward. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. I'll answer any questions that might have popped up in the chat.
Sure. Thank you, Ted.
Sorry, I know I just said I'll answer questions. One question that did pop up in the chat that I don't think was addressed is you can double dip and apply to multiple fellowships here. We do see that people applying for Lawrence Fellowship and the HED or the Foster Brown Fellowship simultaneously. That's totally fine. At some point, we will ask you to pick one if you end up getting far enough in the process. But yes, don't feel like you can only apply to one. You can maximize your chances. The one other thing, and this, I'm glad I vamped for another minute. The one thing I wanted to stress here is the biggest thing that seems to trip up applicants, at least for the Lawrence Fellow process, is filling out the application. The thing that we end up down selecting a lot of people on is they don't get all of their letters in. So please, whoever you ask to write letters for you, stay on them until you know that they've submitted it, because we do have a hard date on that. If you don't have all 3 of your letters in, we are automatically down selecting your application. So make sure you ask people that you trust that will get the letter in, I guess maybe is a better way to say it. So, all right, sorry, I just had to add those 2 things in there. So
Sure. Thank you, Ted. So we already have a few questions. So one question was, if research expenses are a part of the Lawrence Fellowship program, are we expected to provide cost estimates for the research plan in our proposal?
yeah, so you should have a rough idea of what your budget's going to be and what you need to execute your research plan, but you will not be asked to provide full budget details until you're selected as a fellow. And at that point, you'll be working with a Livermore mentor that can help you craft a budget that you know that works for what you're planning for that year of research. So no, on the front end, yeah, it just, you know, but you should think about things like if you need to buy something that's $400K to do your research, that's not going to happen on the Lawrence Fellow, unless on the Lawrence Fellowship. So those kind of items, something that should be a consideration up front, but the finer points of how that 200K per year is spent, that can wait until the end of the process.
Thank you. And another question, I am doing research in one topic, but my previous research experience is in a different topic. Will that be beneficial to add my experience to my experience, or do I need to be specific to my PhD topic when I write my proposal?
So I wouldn't limit yourself. I mean, it really what we're looking at primarily is the area that you're proposing research in and how your track record up to that point um, sort of would underscore your potential for success in that proposed research. So if all of your experience up to this point has been in one area and then you're proposing it in a whole new area, you just need to explain to us in your research statements up front how your past experience is going to help you in executing your research plan. I don't know if that's answering your question directly, but yeah. So you don't need to limit yourself in what areas you apply in. And like I said, those are just those are very big bins, and there's a lot of overlap between them. So it's more about giving the committee the confidence that if you are going into a new area, that you can execute in that new area.
Thanks. So how independent must the research proposal be? What if it requires experiments or lab infrastructure that requires scheduling with other teams or projects?
Yeah. So independent, I mean, it's an original research idea, but yes, I mean, I think it's actually, it sort of supports the overall plan that you're proposing if it does align and requires interaction with people that are here already. Um, so yes, if you have existing relationships or if you're aware of capabilities that we have here at Livermore that would augment or help support your project, then yes, include that in your research plan.
Okay. So thank you very much, Ted. I'm going to
Okay.
continue answering questions in the chat and move on to Matt Buchner.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I was going to share video, but it went away. Hold on. Okay. Go back to my flyer. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. My name is Matt Buchner. I am a physicist in Strategic Deterrence Directorate here at Livermore. I'm also a line manager in Design Physics Division. I'm a deputy hiring manager in Design Physics Division, and I am the lead for the Foster and Brown postdoctoral fellowships. I'm sharing the flyer from the fellowship call out. I wanted to emphasize the due dates. We opened up our fellowship June 30th and it will close the 29th. Just like some of the other fellowships that you've just heard about, we are going to give you an extra week to get your letters of recommendation in. There is a ton of information, including the timelines for getting things organized and delivered to us if you're interested in applying for this fellowship. If you follow that link right there next to the apply button, and that's dp-fellowships.llnl.gov. To give you a little bit more context about this particular fellowship, a lot of what you've heard from the other two fellowship representatives, it's very similar to what we're looking for and some of the requirements. There's a proposal involved, there's a statement of interest. We want to take a look at your CV. We're interested in those 3 letters of recommendation. I wanted to highlight some of the differences. So instead of a 6-page proposal, we're looking for a 3-page proposal. We are not emphasizing any budget details in that proposal. I also wanted to highlight that while the other 2 fellowships are considering applications from foreign nationals as long as they meet that new directive that came out this year, so we actually do require that our applicants be able to obtain a security clearance. So please keep that in mind if you're going to be applying for this fellowship. Let's see. We are interested in a lot of the same disciplines, a lot of the same skill sets. We are looking for folks with engineering and experimental science degrees, PhDs imminent, like computational sciences, planetary science, chemistry, material science. We have some previous projects as well working within these disciplines within Strategic Deterrence Directorate and sitting within Design Physics Division here at Livermore. And those projects have focused on such topics as physics of inertial confinement fusion, turbulence and fluid instabilities, atomistic and continuum models of transport, planetary defense, meaning asteroid deflection and impact modeling, diagnostic development for different types of experimental platforms, computational solid and fluid dynamics, chemical physics, nuclear physics, particle and radiation transport algorithm development, and AI and uncertainty quantification. So a very broad set of STEM research areas for you. If you're bringing those to the table, we would ask you to consider applying for these for this fellowship. And again, you'll notice that it's a lot of the same applicable space that was discussed for the other fellowships. I also wanted to highlight, there was one topic brought up by Ted in the previous section about the conversion process. And I just wanted to highlight for you that some organizations handle conversion differently. Here in Design Physics Division, we do ask that applicants to staff positions, they actually go through the interview process again after the fellowship concludes. So that's one difference between our organization and some of the other organizations here at Livermore. And yes, I also want to highlight the 25% account. It's a very useful career development tool. I do want to emphasize that it's not a tool that you can utilize to go jump on another project, though. It is very much for finishing up work from your graduate education. It's for being able to travel to present that research from graduate school, to finish up papers that you might have been working on. You can use it to grow your career here and make connections, maybe go and observe an experiment that's entirely orthogonal to the research that you're doing during your quote unquote day job. But that's really a key there. It can't overlap with what you're working on the other 75%. And it's not a new project. It's really to grow your career and to grow your horizons here at the lab. So if you are following along with me, I do ask that you navigate over to the web page for the fellowship. There's a lot of information there, and probably any questions you might have right now can be quickly answered there. I would ask that you scroll down to the timeline and process. There's a nice timeline down there you can click on. You can click on the hyperlinks there to see exactly the progression of steps that over the coming months. When we close the fellowship, we're going to start evaluating applications, reviewing your proposals, and starting to plan out how we're going to handle interviews in the new calendar year. So I'll take questions. I think that's everything I wanted to say right now.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So there's a question, can you please elaborate on getting a security clearance? Who can and can't obtain that? Is it related to being a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident?
Yeah, so I typically our fellowship is open to U.S. persons. So I believe that U.S. citizens and U.S. green card holders can apply and then be eligible to go through the process.
And somebody also asked, do you have to obtain the security clearance prior to being awarded the fellowship?
You do not need a security clearance to be awarded the fellowship, but you have to be eligible for one, because pretty quickly after becoming a Foster Brown Fellow, you'll be put in for a security clearance. And we expect that you would receive one while you are a fellow.
And is there any major thematic difference between the Lawrence and Foster Brown fellowships?
There are differences. So we don't have a research budget to the scale that Ted explained that you would have available to you for the Lawrence Fellow. And in fact, a lot of your funding is coming from programmatic sources, meaning your proposal that you prepare is really being used to evaluate and to match you and to identify mentors to help cultivate and grow your research here at the lab. And it's not a guarantee that you'll be working on that proposed research that you outline to the letter of your proposal, but it is a very, very useful foundation for getting started. And in fact, it might actually end up that your research here as a Foster Brown Fellow will be very well aligned with what you propose. But again, we're being supported in kind of a different way. And we have programmatic stakeholders that we need to work on making sure that they have the appropriate buy-in to support research that would be outlined in your proposal, and then connected with the mentors and folks as you go through the process and are successful in the application process.
All right. So I think in the interest of time, we should go over to the the panel, and thank you very much, Matthew. So if you're a member of the panel and you're able to, please turn on your cameras. And all right. So thank you, panelists, for being here to answer people's questions. I first wanted to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with Kyle?
Hi, so yeah, my name is Kyle Petrick. I am a Lawrence postdoctoral fellow in the material science division here at Livermore, and I primarily work on multi-scale modeling and kind of the automation of the development of multi-scale models. So I use symbolic computing to basically take like chemical reaction equations and kind of create a multi-scale model for them to understand kind of how these reactions occur in porous media.
Thank you. How about Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I see a lot of people in the call I recognize the names of, so that's good. I wish you all luck. I used to be an HED Center fellow. I was converted to staff about a year and 8 months ago now. The research I did as a fellow focused mostly on mode converting and playing with lasers in ways that you normally don't to try and do them things, to try and make them do things they normally don't either. So, coming to Livermore was great because, you have access to a lot of lasers, you have a lot of you had access to tools for making optics that you couldn't do anywhere else in the world. And so this is one of the things that, I did that, and one of the reasons I came to Livermore was to, have access to all these nice tools here. So yeah, so mode converting lasers, driving magnetic fields, simulating things, lots of different stuff, but mostly short pulse laser plasma interactions.
Thank you, Andrew. David.
David, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Seem to have lost David. Why don't we skip to Gaia while David's working that out?
Sure. I'm Gaia. I was a Harold Brown postdoctoral fellow, and I was converted earlier this year in the springtime. And I work on material properties under HED conditions using laser facilities, which I'm actually at right now. So it's fun to be able to still do the work that I did as a postdoc.
Thanks, Guy. Patty.
Hey everyone, I'm Patty. I'm the newest HEDS fellow, started about a year ago. Good to hear that there's a new fellow that's been selected. I work on here primarily the opacity on NIF campaign, and one of the major motivations for that is, of course, the solar opacity problem, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. Yeah, I most recently I've been working primarily on getting a more detailed uncertainty quantification to sort of assess the real discrepancy between the models and the data. But my work incorporates a pretty broad collection of things, which is great. There's some hands-on experimental work. I do sometimes diagnostic design from the ground up, some light spectroscopic modeling occasionally. Data analysis, pipeline building. So it's a pretty broad swath of interesting work.
Thanks, Patty. Raspberry.
Hi everyone, happy Friday. So I'm a Lawrence Fellow in the NIF and Photon Science Directorate. I'm wrapping up my third year, hoping to be converted. I think I start next week technically, so I'm a Lawrence Fellow for 24 more hours. I work on as part of my postdoc, I work a lot on laser-driven ion acceleration. and probes and laser-driven probes for high energy density science, and also some inertial confinement fusion as part of kind of this new IFE inertial fusion energy initiative at the lab. And so, yeah, happy to see all of you and have lots of good questions. Please ask us any of your questions.
And David, do you have your sound working now? No, it's still quiet. Well, I'll go on to my next question. Hopefully David will get it working. But so a question for all the fellows, why is Livermore a great place to do your work? Anybody want to take a first stab at that?
I can take a stab.
Sure.
I think it's a great place to work particularly for me, for the HED field, because we have access to this huge laser facility and we can reach insane extreme conditions and do material science at extreme conditions. And so, I've been here, 3 years now, and every time I do laser experiments, it's kind of really exciting because you're probing states of matter that are really unique. And you pair that also with the computing capabilities that we have here. So I'm on the kind of I'd say lucky side that I do both modeling and I do hands-on experiments, and so it's really cool to be able to pair those two together, in this field and do science from like one end to the other, essentially.
Thanks, Guy. Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
I can go. I think so. I did a lot of my PhD work here at the lab, and I think what really kind of standed out to me is just how collaborative people are. I think a lot of questions in the chat were, well, how independent is your work? Like, are you going to be by yourself? And it's definitely not like that. You're not isolated. You're encouraged to work with a lot of folks, and you also feel really supported here. And so I think having access to all that expertise, really friendly expertise, and also a lot of just the infrastructure that you are able to do, as like Paul said, big science, I think makes it a really special place to work, like how Gaia said. So yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo that sentiment a little. I also did my PhD primarily at Sandia, and I'd say, I probably still interact with them on the order of once a week. So keeping those collaborations open is definitely, well within what's possible. I also, the thing I found most enjoyable is how broad the sort of expertise is here. I got involved with a sort of an experiment that's completely outside of my wheelhouse that I have no experience in whatsoever. And everybody's been really welcoming. It's been incredibly interesting. So just the sort of like scope of opportunity, I think, has been really great for me.
Thanks, Patty. So there was a question similar to mine already in the chat. What do you think made a successful applicant to your respective fellowship? Or what advice do you have for the applicant?
I guess I could try and take that one if you'd like. So when I applied, and I've had several people come to me since and ask these questions, there's a few things that are key to a really good proposal. And the first is the fellowships are different to regular postdocs. And if you're applying to the lab and you're proposing something that's really in line with just, I want to work with this scientist who's already doing this work on that project, that's really the work of a postdoc. And what you really want to do is be submitting an original research proposal. So if you're submitting something that's we already do here and there's already a programmatic fund for it, it may be not a suitable proposal. So well, I think, in my opinion, one of the things that the fellowships tries to do is it tries to attract original, high quality talent that normally the lab wouldn't be hiring otherwise. So, if we're just hiring regular postdocs, they go on this project or this project, this project. Whereas like with the fellowships, it's like, oh, I have this really cool idea. I think I could do it in 2 or 3 years. Maybe the lab would be a great place to do that. So in your proposals, you should definitely emphasize what does Livermore have that would make your proposal successful? Is it the computing power? Is it some of the tools we have here? Is it the lasers? And you should really know the details of the specific lasers we have here or lasers that you can use. You can submit a proposal and say, hey, I want to use the Omega laser or a LaserNet facility system, but do my research through Livermore because I want access to your computing system or something like that. And the last key point I wanted to bring up is make sure the proposals are realistic. If you propose something that says, oh, I want to do 20 shots on NIF in 2 years, that's not going to work. That's not how that laser system works. So when if you, probably the best thing you can do is reach out to someone here and say, hey, if I was to propose this, what would be a good way of doing it? If you come in blind and just start proposing things you don't know a lot about, especially in a lab vicinity, that could be difficult.
Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else?
I would say use this time to connect with folks at Livermore to kind of pressure test your proposal. Like everything that Andrew said, being able to connect to the facilities, here at the lab or the capabilities that we have, or kind of understand what the priorities are. And then also if you're a finalist and you get to this kind of panel, being able to really defend your idea is important. So if you can use all of us to kind of connect to people at the lab, and being able to make those connections, I think, is really important early on, even if your fellowship doesn't necessarily need you to identify a mentor. Having a few champions to, as Paul said, to look over that proposal is really important.
Anybody else? Thanks, Raspberry. Okay, I'll do another question. What surprised you most about Livermore now that you are here? Gaia?
Yeah. I think coming from a research group where I wrote a lot of in my research group, I think that I was a little bit more independent. And so when I connected with people at the lab during my PhD, it was like it was maybe it wouldn't say surprising, but it was a good it was kind of near surprising how really collaborative people are, and the ability to be like, oh, I can't help you with this, or and then they immediately can, like, redirect you to someone. I mean, I had the opportunity to do a whole like laser campaign through a collaboration as a grad student during COVID, and so it was really um, it was cool to be able to be so collaborative coming from a research group where I was one of two people doing high pressure material science. So I think that was really a nice thing to experience.
Thanks, Gaia. Anybody else?
Are you able to hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. I'll take a stab at this question, but yeah, I'm David Katami. I'm a Foster Brown Fellow. Sorry for missing the introductions earlier. But I just wanted to kind of add on to kind of the things that are pretty surprising at Livermore. One of the big things for me was just the sheer amount of really interesting things that a lot of people work on that you can, kind of find yourself either being involved in or helping out in other areas, kind of that aligns with your fellowship research. And that's kind of thinking more when you're evaluating like potentially becoming staff later on. You know, there's just a lot of like good synergies that you discover that's very different from an academic institution where, you know, you're kind of the expert at that one thing.
Thanks, David. I think Patty, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to mention quickly that I was surprised at how many different facilities people actually end up doing experiments on. And maybe this was, I mean, maybe this is a function of the sort of insular nature of the particular group I was working with at Sandia. Um, but here I've interacted with people and worked with people who just on the regular do experiments at multiple facilities in any given year. So I really love that. I think it broadens the opportunity scope. It it makes you feel like, oh yeah, maybe I can do propose for experiments, um, and there might be some interesting sort of corner of the space that I can occupy too. um, and yeah, so just the sort of, again, the breadth there, I think has been surprising and really fun for me.
Thanks, Patty. Anybody else?
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I think it's not something that surprised me when I first joined the lab. It's something that surprised me since, is how much the lab has embraced AI and stuff like that. So it's been like an explosion of interest there. So if people out there are thinking about proposals, that might be proposals on the computational sides of things. That might be something to think about as well.
Right. Thank you. How about what are the similarities and differences from working in academia?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, and maybe the same goes for other people on the panel too, but um, I did my PhD primarily at Sandia on the Z machine, so it's sort of the like largest scale experimental facilities have always sort of been available to me, which I think is probably one of the biggest differences I would experience. I imagine I would experience if I was working in academia. Not that those facilities are not available to you as academic collaborators, but the sort of you can't get quite as many shots as like the NIF opacity campaign does, for example. So just the the scale of the experimental facility, the scale of the resources that are available to you, which somebody mentioned earlier on in the panel, um, is just I think it's 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 pretty much the the biggest best you can get, in my opinion. So yeah, that I think is probably the biggest for me, the biggest difference.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a kind of similar sentiment. So I'm kind of on the like computational like simulation side of things. And one of the big things that I think that's very different, one is again like the resources that you have available is pretty unmatched at academic institutions. But also more importantly, it's at the people level that there's just so many experts that can weigh in on your project that are, you know, just like down the hall versus, you know, it's much harder to it makes it a lot easier to collaborate, get immediate feedback, and those kinds of things. And I think that's very different than academic institutions. And I actually really enjoy that aspect of it.
Thank you, David. So someone asked, could anyone who did not do their graduate research at a national lab comment on how they identified a mentor and or made connections with people at the lab to champion their application?
I guess I could try and answer that one because I was in that exact situation. So I did my PhD in Canada, and I had visited Livermore very briefly during my PhD, but I wasn't on any of the graduate research fellowships or anything like that. I wasn't a summer intern here. And so when I applied, I was fortunate that I'd been to conferences where people at the lab had seen my work. And it's conferences and interactions like that that are a really great way of meeting with people. If you just cold email people at the lab, your responses will probably be mixed. If you personally reach out to them, expect in person, or if possible, of course, if you can personally reach out to people that you know their research of, or that you're interested in, doing it in person is way better than just cold. Like we get a lot of cold emails of people saying, "Hey, I want to do research like this," and it's like, well, who is this person? I don't know. So it can be challenging to put your foot in the door, but use conferences as a door wedge is a great way to meet people.
Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else want to answer that question? So as a postdoc fellow, are you able to mentor other people, such as graduate students? How about raise your hand if you've mentored a student while as a fellow? So yes, it's great that when the fellows are able to pass on their expertise to students. And somebody says, my work is in the computational modeling side of things. So I want to work on a computational project that is different from my PhD tangential research area. Is this going to impact the application? I guess that's questions more. So I guess I can take that. Basically, as long as your application makes sense. So if you are able to be an expert in that area, it should be fine. And so put yourself in the reviewer's shoes of, if you're proposing something very different from what you've done, you need to explain it to them of why you're switching fields. And I think, anybody notice any questions I'm missing? And any, or
There was one
yes,
thing I thought of regarding like how to make connections. I think even as if there's a summer internship programs, depending on where you are in your PhD, if you're able to get in to one of the internship programs, that might also be a good way to get your foot in the door. I mean, I did internships like even late stage PhD during the summer. So that's also, I think, a good way to meet people.
And I would also like to make a shout out to all the centers and institutes that we have at Lawrence Livermore, that one of our main mandates is doing outreach. And so, feel free to go to the High University Science Center's website and reach out to us. Our contact information is on that site. Any parting thoughts from any of our panelists?
Looks like there's maybe a question that we missed in the chat. Are there opportunities to visit and give in-person talks to staff on our research for those of us who are local?
So in order to get on site, you do need a badge, so that needs to be arranged in advance with a host. So yes, if you reach out to a staff member and say, hey, I'd like to meet with you, they could organize such a visit, but it can't be done very quickly. But if you're a US citizen, that could be done like in a week's notice, or maybe if things work smoothly. If you're a foreign national, it can take a bit more time, like a month or two. So any parting words of advice from any of the fellow panelists?
I guess quickly, a parting thought that I've given people before. When I submitted my research proposal and others that I've helped on, what really helped a lot was don't just put all your eggs in one basket. And what I did on mine is I said, okay, I have 3 goals or 2 or 3 goals that I want to do with my fellowship over this amount of time. And then maybe a secondary offshoot goal that I could spend, a little bit of my time here and there working on. That's a lot better because a lot of the time when you do original research, you can't foresee the roadblocks until you get there. And sometimes those roadblocks are so significant that it could put a dead halt on your research. And that can be seen, and sometimes staff scientists who are reviewing your proposal may be able to see those roadblocks just from their prior experiences. So if you put into your research proposal like a generalized theme and say, I want to explore XYZ, and I'm going to do it through these 3 methods. If one of those methods ends, then you still have options B and C to follow down that road. So I think that's a strong way of writing the proposal, and make sure you make that really clear and presentable. And as I said already, emphasize what Livermore has that you need to do that research. If it's computers, if it's tools, if it's lasers, or whatever else you need, emphasize those things.
Thanks, Andrew. Raspberry.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, like Andrew said, having clear deliverables and like risk mitigation strategies shows that you're kind of thinking on another level for your proposal. I think the other thing is just know your audience. So these are all different flavored proposals. For the HED one, you'll be evaluated by people that are in this HED field. For the Lawrence Fellow, there's people that are evaluating your proposal that are obviously technical, but could be in biology, chemistry, physics. And so make sure that you are aware of your audience and that you might need to tailor your proposal a little bit more to add more background, for example, or motivation to make it compelling to a wider group of people.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Similar to that, and not just, I guess, the proposal, but for finalists, if you do have to give like a talk, like a seminar, to also make sure that is tailored to the audience and to make it broader. So that's something that might be, I guess, a little different from, in my experience, where I would attend topical conferences where people were coming from the same subject, but there's a huge variety of backgrounds and different things that people are working on here. So just make that, keep that in mind that not everyone might be coming from the exact like field of not even physics, but they might be coming from biology. So yeah, just be aware of that.
All right. So I'd like to thank all our panelists and speakers. I'll be sticking around if anybody had some questions that we didn't get to. But otherwise, everybody's welcome to sign off. And thank you again for attending, and good luck on your applications.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. And if you have a question, you can use the raise hand feature. And Jen, you can stop the recording.